Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the show answering the question, how did they get there? I'm your host, Kim Minnick. Each episode, I invite a guest to complete a reflective exercise, plotting key moments of their life and career against a line of neutrality. Together, we explore the ups, downs, and everything in between on their journey. I am so pumped to welcome today's guest, David Smith. David, how are you?
I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Thank you so much for joining. David and I met a few years ago, and he gave me a sneak peek of his story over July 4th. So I begged and pleaded. So thankful that you're joining us. And the first question, as always, what's taken up your time these days, personally, professionally, holistically?
Let's start with personally. My parents came to visit here in California for the last 6 weeks. They're from Australia. That's where I grew up. And when you're traveling that far from Australia, they like to make the most of it. So a
Of
6 week
course.
visit it was. They stayed with me here in the house, and have been having a fantastic time. I just took them back to the airport last night, so now I get a little bit of downtime
I mean,
do my
always
own
nice
thing.
to say goodbye. Love them deeply. Love to see
Yeah,
them here. Don't mind when
almost
they
every
leave.
day. Missing them already. Huh?
I am a huge fan of your mom. In case she listens, Mom, I miss you. Come
She
back
will
soon.
listen. I know.
Amazing.
Yeah. And professionally, work, has been keeping me busy. I work for Microsoft in developer relations, leading a team of people that do artificial intelligence. And as you can imagine, for the last 2 years, that has been a crazy, crazy time. So that has been keeping me super busy.
I mean, definitely a big topic for folks who don't know what is developer relations, like a high level overview.
That's a really good question. A lot of people think it's just like standing up on stage and going on long trips and doing fancy meals and stuff like that. It's not like that at
And
all.
Twitter, and lots
Right,
of
Twitter, yeah,
Twitter.
well, it used to be Twitter. Twitter these days is not such a
X.
big thing. That's a whole other topic. But the way I like to explain it is we are advocates for a specific community. And in my particular case, it's the community of artificial intelligence engineers. We advocate for Microsoft to that community, telling AI engineers, why Microsoft is a cool place to be working with AI and why Microsoft has a great platform for building applications with AI. And that's the visible side of the job. That's the bit that people associate with the travel and the conferences. But
Mhm.
actually, most of the job goes in the other direction. We are advocates for, in our case, the AI engineer community within Microsoft. So we help product teams at Microsoft understand better how to build their products so that people can use them more effectively and ideally fall in love with them. We work with marketing teams to help on their messaging and communications. We work with all sorts of groups at Microsoft, but we're not in marketing, we're not in sales. We're actually very closely tied with the engineering team because we are developers that talk to developers.
Amazing. So you help influence the product, influence the direction, and really kind of like bridge the gap between users and company. I love that.
Exactly. I try to avoid that influencer term because it's kind of a bit negative. Like, feel like we're influencers, but ultimately, yes, that is the job. We're trying to
Well,
influence hearts and minds.
exactly. Not influencer, just
Yeah, yeah,
a part of it. No, I
yeah.
get it. I get it. Well, I am so excited to dive into your journey line today. If I may, it looks like we start back in 1991, a little bit above the line of neutrality. For
Hmm.
those who are listening, you can check out David's journey line in the comments below. But I see you decided to choose computer science over statistics. Kick
Oh, is
us
that what I put
off.
down?
Where
Because
are
it's
we
actually the other
at?
way around. I chose statistics over computer
Oh,
science.
so just no, I just can't read. That's what it is. You chose statistics over computer science.
Yeah,
Uh, Start us off, kick us off. Where are we? Time, space,
yeah.
all the
So
good
I went
stuff.
to school in Australia, a little town called Adelaide. There's only two universities there. I went to the one and I started doing mathematics and French and physics as you do when you're not sure what you're doing as an undergrad.
Mathematics and French and
Yes,
physics,
exactly.
as you do.
The obvious
Right.
one. But that's what's nice about University of Australia. You get to pick and choose and kind of figure out your way as you go along. You don't have to choose a major. But in American
Mhm.
terms, I probably ended up with a double major of computer science
Okay.
and statistics. My computer science
Nice.
and mathematics by the time I finished my undergraduate. The
Okay.
logical choice at that point would have been to go into computer science because at that time, talking in the early 90s, computers were super hot, programmer was the hot new career, everything like that. But it just turned out I really loved math, and
No maths. I
particularly
like
statistics.
maths.
Yeah, like I've been speaking with my mum in Australian for the last 6 weeks, so I'm saying maths again for the Americans. Like I
Maths.
did math. And one of the subjects I really, really liked was statistics. And at the end of my undergraduate degree, I actually did an internship at CSIRO. It's kind of like the Australian equivalent of NIST, like the government science organization.
Okay, cool.
And just really loved working with data and solving problems with numbers. And actually, mathematics is a bit esoteric, but statistics is applied to real world problems. I worked on solving the problem of making the rollers that make aluminum foil smoother so that they could, make better aluminum foil.
Who knew that was a problem that needed to be
Exactly,
solved?
who did know that thing? So I fell in love with it then and decided to do what would you call a master's degree in statistics. And that's kind of where my career kicked off.
Ah, so cool. And what did you do with that career? Where did you go from there?
I went to France.
Oh,
I
of
was
course.
Yeah, I was really young when I finished my master's. Like, I finished my undergrad. Well, I finished high school at 15, so I finished my undergrad at 18. So
Okay.
I finished my
Okay.
master's this year, they call it in Australia, at 18.
Oh, wow.
So I could have gone straight into the workforce at that point and actually had some options. Like, I got an invitation to move to Antarctica and work for the British Antarctic Survey and stuff like that. But I decided I was too young to start work at that age.
Okay.
And also, I had studied French at university, as I mentioned. I'd never gotten a chance to speak it. I don't know why they teach people French in Australia because there's no French
Not
people.
super popular over there?
Yeah,
I took French in high school and didn't use a lick of it. Yeah.
I did love the language. I didn't complete it all the way through university. I dropped it for math stuff, but always wanted to speak it. So I decided to spend a year backpacking. So early on, after my 19th birthday, I got on a plane to London, as it turned out, because some family connections there, with my backpack and little else, a one-way ticket, and ended up spending 2 years backpacking around Europe.
2 years. Firstly, did you get to make use of your French?
Yeah, I spent about 6 months in France and had a fantastic time. It was just, honestly, it was just such a great experience. I think, even more than the choice of career, that was probably one of the best decisions I had, was to go traveling. You got to realize how much your worldview is centered on just where you grew up and the things you experience. Until you travel, you realize, oh, that thing I thought was unique at home is actually like really common, and vice versa. That thing I thought was just standard, that is, nobody else in the world has that. And you don't get that perspective when you're traveling. So that was one of the best things.
Do you have any of those points, those like juxtapositions that really stick out, or things that like kind of still impact you or stick with you today?
I think, especially on the French side, just being in a country where your language is not the default, like that gave me a lot of perspective, especially early on. Even though I'd spent 6 years at school learning to speak French, I could understand nobody.
Yeah.
I could read fairly well. That was probably the only thing that got me by. But like having to present myself, live through my life with this struggle in communication was I think that really gave me vision was how, in this case, immigrants are perceived in ways that kind of innate. And I mean that in this sense that I had a good friend that lived in Paris, Australian. I used to travel to Paris every night. I lived about half an hour away by train, and I used to go and visit my friend Jenny. She was an au pair, so she had little kids. And I remember one time I was chatting as best I could with those kids, who were obviously French. And at one point, this little girl says to me, "Why do you speak like a baby?"
Oh no!
I just like, it just was a sudden clarity of like, oh my God, this is how everybody sees me. Like, I think sound stupid or like a child or something, but it's just that I don't know how to communicate with you in a way.
Yeah.
And that kind of flip of perspective for me was just like really, really enlightening. And, it gave me, I don't, I am an immigrant. I am an immigrant here in the US, but I'm not a typical immigrant. When
Common
when politicians
language.
talk about the immigrants, like they're not talking about white guys like me. But
No,
that being said, I
you
do
are.
appreciate how immigrants are perceived in a way that is almost always completely unfair.
Strong agree. And it's funny you mentioned talk like a baby. I've been desperately trying to learn Spanish, and I try and talk with small children when I find them because
Yeah.
that's my level of Spanish.
Yeah.
And that's the intelligence that I project in Spanish. And I have good friends who English is their second language, and they often say I'm smarter in my home language, and I'm like, you're just as smart. Our language is just tough. So I so appreciate that perspective, and it seems like this was really like kind of a high point on your journey. Really enjoyed your time
Absolutely. I mean, it
abroad.
was just a great way to experience something different, and it also really taught me to be independent.
Yeah.
You live as a child or teenager, and you've got your friends and your family and your whole societal infrastructure around you, and then suddenly having to figure out, like, where am I going to get my next meal, and where am I going to be sleeping tonight? All those kinds of things is, it's a good life lesson. When kids come up and ask me, what should I do in my career? I always recommend them, like, take some time to travel. It'll give you a perspective you won't
Oh,
get anywhere else.
what a good recommendation. Did you find like a gap year or a travel year was common in Australia? Because I don't think it's super common in the US.
It's quite common for those Australians that do travel. Like if you're an
Mm,
Australian, you're going to take that time to travel. You're going to travel overseas most likely, and you're going to take a long time. 3 months
hmm
absolute minimum. A lot of people will aim, for a year in the beginning. And
mm,
when I was doing that kind of thing, I came across a lot of other travelers my age from other countries, but typically they'd only do it for like a few weeks, over the summer or whatever. And I recommend to people to try the long gap year because that's kind of what really you can't just do 6 months on your savings accounts, but
yeah.
you've got to kind of find a way to survive. And
Yeah.
I found that valuable.
Cool. Ah, I love that advice. Well, the travel and the good times and the carefree life doesn't last forever.
Yeah,
And I see you settle in to the UK and start your PhD. Not quite as high as traveling around and backpacking, but
yeah.
settled in. What's going on?
Yeah, well, so I mean, this was I spent all that time traveling, but I met some people in Lancaster University in the north of Lancaster through my connections through statistics. It's a big school for statistics. I went there because I had some connections through my university, and ultimately a job offer came up to be a research assistant
Cool.
there at Lancaster University. So that gave me some money to keep on working even before I finished traveling. So it's been a couple of months working and then go up and traveling for another couple of months and coming back and forth. And then ultimately that transitioned into a PhD program. So still a full-time
Okay.
employee. So that gave me an income as I was living there, but also studying for a PhD in statistics. And, that was my first time, living permanently in a foreign country. Had a great network of friends there. Loved the lifestyle, loved the people, and loved the weather. Really enjoyed my time there. It's like a small country town with a big university attached to it. Good mix of city and country, and I loved it.
Yeah. In America, we would call those college towns, and they're fantastic. How long were you there? I see this is kind of like on the edge before a little bit of a dip down. So tell me a
Yeah,
little bit more about your UK PhD
yeah.
and the
Well,
slide
I
that
was there for
happens.
probably 6, 7 years in total. I did a few years of working back and forth and traveling, and then came back and started the PhD program. Fell in love for the first time there. Came out,
Ah, first love.
in college town, all that kind of stuff.
Wild.
First, sort of a long-term boyfriend there. Went on for a few years. It was great, but as these things do, eventually kind of it fizzled out, and we broke up. And I was like trying to figure out what to do next in my life. And also at the same time, I started getting job offers through my
Mm,
to- to- so
Yeah.
particular biostaticians in certain pharmaceutical companies were well aware of and nobody else had ever heard of. But I eventually got a job with a software company that specialized in the software that I was using. It was called S. And they basically gave me a job offer to be a tech support agent. But that meant moving to London. And
Okay.
I said at the time, like I'd continued doing the PhD, in my spare time, but it's 40 years, 30 years later now, and I haven't finished it, and I don't think I ever will. So.
No, it just didn't quite. Still in
Exactly.
your spare time, though. You just need more spare time.
Loads
That's
and
all it
lots
is.
and everything associated.
Look, I don't know. If you ever want to get a job, you might need that PhD.
Well, that
So
was
you've
kind of, I guess
abandoned.
that's why I kind of moved that, up the scale because I think if all that hadn't, I probably would still be in the UK or maybe some other university in the world. I'd still be in the academic system. I would never have
Hmm.
gotten into the career I am now had that not happened. Had I not sort of got out of academia. And I think I could have had a successful career in academia. I probably would have enjoyed it, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much as, the path my life did take me on.
Ah, amazing. So the life takes you on. Of course, my chief happiness officer in the background is shaking and scratching himself. So your first boyfriend, you came out, and your first boyfriend was a
Yeah,
long-term boyfriend.
yeah.
That is crazy. Did you get to explore more and have more fun while you were in London?
I, I did. Well, yes and no. It was a
No
weird.
need to. No need to.
I mean, yeah, definitely. The answer is yes. I mean, London certainly had more of a scene than Lancaster did. Got to go to the clubs and all that kind of stuff. But that was never my thing.
I would love
But
to
yeah,
see you in a
it was
club.
good. But I wasn't a huge fan of London as a city. I lived kind of in the outskirts. It was a long travel to go into the center and with friends and things like that. So when I got the opportunity a couple of years later to take a promotion that involved moving to Seattle, I jumped.
Ooh,
I'd never really considered living in the United States. It was never a goal of mine. But through work, I'd been to Seattle a couple of times and just loved it as a city. And, I was
really?
tired of London, so I took the leap and moved to the United States in early 2000 for this job.
And started an upswing. Welcome to the U.S.
Yeah,
So about what early 2000s you said?
yeah, beginning of 2000, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what was Seattle like? What was the promotion like? How is that new chapter of your life?
All right. Well, I mean, certainly culture shock again. um, very different country.
Hmm.
Took a lot of getting used to, but it was exciting because, I mean, oddly enough, like I felt Seattle felt like a more European city than London did in the sense of, it was smaller and, I lived in a neighborhood and I could walk around places and things like that. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. Fell in with, a great social network here very quickly. Here in the States, I live in California now, but up in Seattle. Funnily enough, like when I got my first apartment, it was pretty close to downtown Seattle. And
Hmm.
just down the street, so I just started hanging out there because that was obviously was my local.
Just,
I met some really fun people there, and short-term friends. But the really cool thing was I got introduced to rugby through this. John Cook, his name was my rugby coach for a few years. He's since passed away, but he convinced me that I should play rugby simply because I was Australian. I had never played rugby in my life.
of course.
He was saying, "You're Australian. You must know how to play it." Okay, well, I was up for anything at that point, and so I joined a rugby team and made a great friends. Fantastic. And ultimately met my husband Jay through that process.
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, how are you as a rugby player? How was being on a rugby team?
Yeah,
Are you okay?
it was surprisingly good. I had never played like a real physical contact sport like that before. I did play Aussie rules as a child, which is
Okay.
contact-ish, but like I was 7 at the time. Very little. I played volleyball.
Hmm.
Played a little bit of soccer. But rugby was completely alien. But I loved it. It was just, especially at that age when you got a lot of energy and, nothing can take you down. I
Yeah.
would get a lot of aggression, hit a lot of people really hard, and it turns out to be really, really fun. So I enjoyed
It
that
does
part
look
of it.
like a physical sport, I must
It is a
say.
physical part, yeah. It was a gay rugby team that I was playing with, the Seattle Quake. This was in the
Cool.
very early years of gay rugby teams. And it was also kind of an honor because we got to play in the inaugural Bingham Cup. Mark Bingham, you might know that name, the guy from United 93 that took down the terrorists on the plane,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
was a rugby
yeah.
player in San Francisco for the San Francisco Fog. And after he was
Okay.
killed, his mother put together a tournament of gay rugby teams called the Bingham Cup. And I played in that for the first
Wow.
couple of years, and it's a tournament that still goes on to this day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What that's such a cool story. Gosh, and then how was work during this time? You had just
Work
gotten
was,
a promotion.
yeah,
Uh,
work was great because
work was in the background, maybe.
I mean, I'd progressed from being like a tech support engineer and could just kind of helping
Sure.
individual people solve their problems. And I think through that process, I had given a lot of feedback to the product team about like, if this was changed, then I wouldn't be having all these support questions and all that kind of stuff. So eventually they brought
Okay.
me into a product management role, and brought me over
Cool.
to Seattle to that to lead one of the minor products, and eventually, went up through the ranks to lead the whole product management exercise there for that company, and that was a great experience. I mean, first of all,
Yeah.
just learning to work directly with customers on product management as opposed to through individual one-on-one service thing, but more proactively doing
Yeah.
research with customers, finding out, if we did this, how would this change your use of our product? Would you use
Mm.
it bring feedback to the product team so that they can improve the product and just keep on going through that cycle? I got to introduce a whole new product line by taking it from the desktop to the server and doing more of the
Ooh.
B2B type of side of the business, working with whole companies installing platforms as opposed to individuals using products. Learned to learn a team there. They put people under me, and did my first management role, and turned out I love that as well. And helping people help me succeed and helping them succeed. So that was just a great experience. It definitely got me to where I am today.
Amazing. And you just continue this upswing. You had mentioned, and I cut you off, but you mentioned you met your husband. And at the very, very high with sparkles and smiles, married to Jay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, well, that was incredible. Like, I met Jay. Well, it wasn't exactly through rugby. Like, we had met through an online dating thing in the very early days of online dating with
Nice.
the stranger. Seattle's
Yeah,
easy.
never meet strangers on the internet, but
Yeah,
here's a dating site. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and we had our first date and hit it off. But shortly after that, after our first date, I had to go to a rugby tournament for a while. And then while I was away, that same coach met up with Jay and said, "You should play rugby too." So he joined the rugby team while I was away, and then we played rugby together for several years. But just I don't know, like it's kind of hard to explain when you just kind of know that you've met the right person. And it's like Jay and I were very unlike as people. Like we had very different backgrounds. He was from the States, I was from Australia. He was more from the literature side of things, I was from math and science and computer side of things. He had a job in branding, I had a job in software. But also we kind of figured out over time that we were also really alike in lots of ways. Even professionally, like our jobs ultimately involved advocacy. He was doing public relations and I was advocating to technical communities, and it turned out we had a lot of common in that. So I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but a lot of that, especially in the last 10 years or so, we worked together in the same house a lot. So I've been overheard him sort of doing his meetings just like I'm doing now, and
Yeah.
I learned a lot from him about manage people and how to negotiate with people and things like that. So we met. We're alive. This is back in 2004. We went through this very strange period legally because this is all the time of marriage rights.
Mhm.
Domestic partnership registered in Seattle, and then we moved to California, and that was recognized. We bought our first house together, second house together actually, when we moved from Seattle. And it becomes important because whether you're married or not made a big difference to the mortgage. That we were registered domestic partners, and that counted in California. But then Prop 8 happened in California, and then we weren't domestic partners anymore. And then we got married in Vancouver, BC, when Canada made it legal. And then America didn't. It was all very, very complicated for a long time. For several years, people would ask us the question, "Are you
Crackers.
married?" And we'd say, "Well, it kind of depends which jurisdiction you're in." And we're waiting on a Supreme Court decision about this thing. But yeah.
And like just hearing you talk about it in buying a home,
Mhm.
right? Like I don't know if a lot of people realize like it's actually more than just a piece of paper. It
Mhm.
enables a lot of things. So
Yeah,
having to figure out your jurisdiction to figure out if you're married or not,
yeah,
awful, gross, terrible.
exactly. Yeah. Hmm. But
Ugh,
best thing I ever did was getting married to Jane.
of course. And you moved to California, and best thing can't top it. But we do move on to a revolutions blog. Tell me
Oh
about
yeah,
that.
this is after I worked at that software company for a while. I went into the startup scene for a bit. I got recruited to join a startup. It's called Revolution Computing at the time, which
Cool.
was in the open source sector. So they were doing open source
Oh, cool.
version of the software that I used to work for. Um, so that was a leap. So moving from a company that was listed on the Nasdaq to this tiny startup.
That may or may not be profitable.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But the work was incredible. My job sort of changed various times over the year. Ultimately, what we had to do as a company and what I had to do as a person was build a market for this software product, which was number one, free, available free because it's based on open source software. I need to convince companies who ultimately were going to be paying for this software that it's going to be beneficial to them and all the problems associated with it. It was really an awareness problem because any individual yeah, we love this. We picked it up in school, open source, it's great.
It's
But then to
great.
the company side, so is there something to pay for? Justify.
Hmm.
But there's kind of two ways to go about it. One is you can sort of make a big face to the businesses and benefits and value and all that kind of stuff. We decided to take a little bit of different route from the bottom up, directly from the developers.
I love that.
Statisticians. Data science was a new concept at this time. It was just
Mm.
becoming popular. I, with several other people, did all I could to make data science as a concept a popular and valuable concept because most of the people at that
Do we
time
owe data
doing
science to you?
not to me. Drew Conway, a friend of mine, was
Okay.
actually kind of one of the primary people that started this. He was, if you ever seen the data science Venn diagram, he was the one that came up
Yeah.
with that. But we all worked to kind of popularize this as a term because we knew that the people that were doing these deep analyses in the back offices of companies and writing these reports that determined whether like a new financial hedge fund got created or whether a new drug got approved. They were doing all this critical work, but it was very much seen as a back office type, give it to the smart people and wait 6 months kind of a process. What we wanted to do was to make companies recognize that the people that are doing this type of work with the data analysts, the data scientists, they were
Hmm.
critical to what businesses were doing.
Yeah.
Businesses that weren't doing this kind of analysis and, importantly, employing these kinds of people were missing out. So our
Agree.
strategy, which I think some of this is in retrospect, it was a strategy. Probably at the time, it was just, oh, we were doing stuff, but it turned
A
worked
little
out.
luck, a little strategy, a little
Exactly.
preparation.
But I'll say that our strategy was to make data science a valuable role in companies as opposed to
Hell yeah.
trying to sell software specifically for data science.
Hell yeah.
No, that works. Data science was the cool job, was the number one job for several years running. Um, universities started running courses with the title data science as opposed to statistics. A lot of people got into the business. It was a really, really great time. And they were successful in terms of because we popularized that concept, data science, our software amongst that community was already associated with data science, and then businesses just came along for the ride.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was doing so well, it got acquired. Am I skipping ahead
Yeah.
too fast?
Ultimately, the company was acquired by Microsoft. When was that? Back in 2009 or so, I think.
Okay.
Again, another interesting life choice. It was like, do I jump ship and go with this big company? I did not have a good opinion of Microsoft.
I
Definitely
think that's
changed
fair.
since.
I think around that time, most
Yeah, I
people
mean,
thought
Microsoft was kind of the
Microsoft
evil empire.
antiquated,
Yeah,
Hotmail, yeah.
exactly. And especially coming from an open source background,
Mm.
Microsoft. Through the
Yeah.
process of the acquisition, I got to meet with a lot of people at Microsoft. To visit a few times. What I discovered was that the people everybody kind of understood what we were trying to do. Satya Nadella had just come in, taking over from Steve Ballmer, and the culture had already changed, but also seeing a company where the culture was just actively transitioning from this old guy to this new guy was really interesting to me, and the chance to be a part of that was really exciting. So actually, I'm still at Microsoft today. I love being there. But that was certainly a good move, both for the company and for me personally.
Yeah. And I think it's always, I have lived a professional life in VC funded startups. There's always the hope that there's an acquisition or an exit. And you bring up an interesting point, going from such a small company to being acquired by a large behemoth. Like that's a cultural change. And some people love it and some people thrive and some people are hesitant and it works out and some people decide to leave. What a nice little, like, I don't know, it's right on your line of neutrality. So I kind of love that.
Not a lot of neutrality because I mean it wasn't all flowers and puppies, joining a
No.
big company like that. So, again, culture shock. Um,
Yeah.
Moving from a startup, with 200 people, where you know exactly who to go to.
Mm-hmm.
You need something done. Moving to a big
The
company,
CEO, the
moving into a
founders.
new city, the people around you, but trying to figure out how to get anything new or unexpected done, or who needs to approve it, or it's taken me literal years to figure out. So, I think it took me probably 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
In most cases, I kind of know what to do. So
Yeah.
it took a long time to figure
Wow. Like I talk about onboarding being 6 months, but
out.
like, yeah, truly those large corporate, those large companies, it's so
Yeah.
much to navigate and
Yeah.
learn. Beautiful. Anything else you want to touch about on your career at Microsoft before we talk about some more personal things on your journey line?
I mean, just on the career at Microsoft, it's it's just been exciting being at a place that's gone through so much. I mentioned the cultural
Yeah.
change already. It was just been really interesting to see this transition from a company that thought everything has to be the Microsoft way. We set the standard.
Hmm.
Kind of being part of that, seeing some of the old stuff that was still set, you know, some heated arguments with those kinds of people from time to time. And then not at Microsoft anymore, and I still am. So, yeah,
That's like a
things,
little hair toss for you.
yeah, that's right. And also just the whole AI transition. It's
Yeah.
been lucky to be the big transitions, transition to big data, the transition to AI, just seeing nimbly a company this is our focus. We're going to make this. One of my big frustrations, I think, coming to Microsoft in the early years was just the rate of change. At a startup, you can do things in a couple of months. Idea or product, and that
Yeah.
was never the way until a couple of years ago.
Big ships can be hard to turn.
Yeah, exactly. That's Microsoft, being able to go from an idea to in people's hands in the space of a short space of time. I never thought I would see it last year, routinely.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, we'll continue on the journey line. We hit the lowest point where Jay passed away. I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So, Jen and I were married for 16 years, I think 17 years. We had just moved to California. Just one day, the doctor's office, he fainted. Hospital because he fainted.
Oh,
So number one, that was a huge shock.
yeah.
At the peak of his career, he just received of a PR company. He just moved to California to be close to his clients.
Yeah.
Especially at the time, we didn't for a while. And he freed and what are the prospects, and it was a good 6 months to figure out. But it turned out that he had leukemia drugs for, and the prognosis seemed pretty good. Most of the doctors said before we got the drugs. We had supplies of masks well before COVID broke out.
Mm-hmm.
But a few years after that, so the first drug was working, transitioned to a new drug. That worked for a while, and then it was just complication after complication after complication.
Yeah.
One day, hospital,
Fair.
there's just this all happened very suddenly. Having our lives, everything was good. In the space of just 3 weeks, it all.
Yeah.
The last, the last 10 days was what he had a surgery like last year. We, for a few days, it was just the was always like he's we weren't sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm. What can we, me, listeners, whoever, what can we do to best honor Jay's memory?
He kind of others, I think. The thing that people, empathy, old pinnacle person. Just, you know, you need to have empathy.
Yeah. It's all about balance in the relationship, and y'all found it. I was fortunate enough to meet Jay. Huge fan, will always be. Would love to honor his memory in that way. Whew, whew. Not to cut it too short, but I do want to move on to this little high point. Cute pup, man after my own heart, Dawson. How are what's happening now these days with you and Dawson?
Well, I mean, Dawson is incredible. Just after Jay died, my mum came over from Australia to help me out. So
Hmm.
it was very,
Yeah.
grief really, really fucked you
Yeah.
to the point of literally get out of bed in the morning. Couldn't eat. Couldn't feed myself.
I believe it. I believe it.
So mum came over to help me out. She was really outstanding. But during that process, it was
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, we ended up visiting the rescue shelter in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
He was found with his mother. They needed a sort of foster family to take care of him. So I said, and I fell in with them, and Dawson in particular.
Yeah.
He was just like a little bundle of black fluff when I got him. Now he's 100 pounds.
Now he's a big bundle of
Yeah, now
black
he's a
fluff.
big, but he's just a great guy. He's my constant companion. He's always like laying at my feet while I walk, and he sleeps on my bed at night. And, it's just knowing that there's somebody here all the time is worth any amount of fruits.
Of course, that's why he's a big bundle of joy now. There's all those treats. Well, David, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the journey line. I will turn it over to you. Tell the folks where they can find you if they want to find you, or promote what you got going on. Tell the people what's next.
Super nice. But, you can find me on various places, including Twitter or whatever it's called now, and GitHub, as Revo David. Not too active on those online things as I used to be, mainly because Twitter is just terrible these days. So that's a good way to find me. If you DM me there, I still read my DMs. But this has been a real pleasure, Kim. Thank you for putting this together.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time on Journey Lines.